quick question: did suffering trip you up at all? Where you're like, "Oh my God, really suffering?" Because for me, that wasn't my experience of this poem, but it's one of the things that interests me about it is how she handles suffering without like sentimentality. And so I was just curious if you saw that and thought, "Oh, poet word."
That did not bother me, probably because I haven't read a lot of poems, so I haven't come across that very much. So I was intrigued by the suffering. I was wondering who was suffering,
Yeah.
and why they were suffering.
So, but you didn't stop there. You just kept going. So.
No. And the other thing that really drew me in was the second line, "Hear me out, that which you call death, I remember." I was really intrigued by the whole narrative voice of sort of speaking to me as a reader, "Hear me out." It's like a direct challenge. And then "that which you call death, I remember," is just a very interesting line in terms of, well, you call it death, but here's what I remember about it. And who wouldn't want to find out what the answer to that riddle is?
Could just back up a little, and talk about first time you read it, and why, you said it was compelling right from the beginning, but I'm wondering what you remember about that first reaction.
The first reaction, so the third stanza and the fourth stanza, talks about hearing noises overhead. And the first time I read that, I took it as a resurrection story where someone was actually buried and hearing what's going on, coming alive and hearing what's going on the surface. I didn't realize until I read the poem several times that this is the wild iris talking.
And what clued you in? Like, how did you? Because there's nothing.
There's nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you figure that out?
I think it was the title, which at first I didn't understand why that was the title, but then it just hit me that it is the wild iris that is underground.
Yeah. And the whole book is like that, where it's from the point of view of flowers. A lot of them are from the point of view of flowers.
Mm-hmm.
But she doesn't, there's no way of knowing that unless somebody tells you. This is the first poem in the book, so
right.
It's bold.
And I think, as you would read the whole book, then you would figure out what that whole scheme is, obviously.
But you've already got it right from the start because of the title. And I think, that's something that I would emphasize is that you always want to think about why this title and how does the title give you vital information that you might not have just from the poem.
Right.
And you did that perfectly. Like, how does the title speak to the poem in a way that cues you in?
Right,
so
exactly.
Always look at that, yeah.
Exactly. Titles, as in short stories and novels, are just critically important.
Exactly. But as somebody told me, a teacher, the title for a poem, and for everything, but is valuable real estate, right? You've got this page-long poem, and then that's all that you get as a writer to make it come together. So.
Of course, with novels, the title also, the marketing aspect factors in.
Yeah, that's true. That's true, yeah.
Which is just totally different, obviously.
Oh, yeah, actually, at some point I'd love to hear about how you chose your title, but for now we'll stick to his skills as a poet. I do have one question, because you talked about, The Wasteland, Sylvia Plath, John Donne, right? So Plath can be very difficult to read, at least on a deeper level. And certainly The Wasteland is, known for that. And John Donne, it's, of course, one of my favorites, but we're not there yet. Mm-hmm. But the question I have for you related to that is whether this experience was substantially different than approaching Eliot or Plath or Donne, and what it felt like at the end. And then I'll read it. So can you, if you answer that question, and then I'll read it again so people have a refreshed mind about the poem.
I think the difference with Eliot and Sylvia Plath, John Donne, it was such a long time ago, I can't even remember Anyway,
You mean you never went back?
I never went back. No, and maybe the John Donne episode that you do will inspire me to come back to John Donne.
Yeah.
Who had a very interesting life. I remember his biography. But anyway, The Wasteland and Sylvia Plath. I talked about puzzles, and they were just more mystifying. But the language was so interesting. I felt, wow, there's really something interesting going on here, but it's really hard for me to figure out what it is. And with The Wasteland, they have the footnotes that help you a lot in terms of all the references it makes to classical stuff. So I think with this poem, it was less of a puzzle. It was more of almost like a narrative that I could follow.
I will just read the poem right now, just so that you hear it again, and we'll go on to talk a little bit more about clues as to how you go back and start to trust yourself enough to know that you're going to get something from this poem. The Wild Iris. At the end of my suffering, there was a door. Hear me out. That which you call death, I remember. Overhead, noises, branches of the pine shifting, then nothing. The weak sun flickered over the dry surface. It is terrible to survive as consciousness buried in the dark earth. Then it was over. That which you fear, being a soul and unable to speak, ending abruptly, the stiff earth bending a little, and what I took to be birds darting in low shrubs. You who do not remember passage from the other world, I tell you I could speak again. Whatever returns from oblivion returns to find a voice. From the center of my life came a great fountain, deep blue shadows on azure sea water. I wouldn't say that's a model reading, but it was more slow.
It was good. It was very different than my reading, and I noticed you emphasized the word you.